So I've been seeing a lot of things about ACEOs online over the last few months, and I'm all about trying new art things and experimenting with art equipment, so I thought I'd give it a go. Now, I did learn a few things along the way, so I thought I'd put this video together to share with you the things that I'd learned, the do's and don'ts, and there's a little experiment as well about how well they sold online. So I'm going to share with you a few things that I learned along the way, just in case you'd like to give it a go. And the first important thing is that size matters. The finished cards have got to be exactly 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So the first ones that I made, I came up with the idea that I would make some fancy backgrounds and then I'd chop them down to size. So I did just that. I made my backgrounds and I did initially measure them out on paper. I taped them down and I used my Inktense pencils just to make some pretty backgrounds. Once they were dry, I just drew on them with some tangles. And then all I needed to do was cut them down to size. Now that is easier said than done. I used a guillotine, which is in centimetres, not inches, so that's the first hurdle. I had to convert my inches to centimetres, and then I had to make sure that everything was perfectly aligned. Now these first attempts, some of the edges were not completely straight, and on some of them my drawings ended up being slightly wonky on the page because I'd just not measured things properly. So I scrapped that idea and I decided just to cut the paper first and then draw on top of them. Now this did give me better control over my cutting because I wasn't trying to line up an existing drawing, so I could just cut, totally happy, very easy. And I cut up some sheets of my Inktense backgrounds and also some blank sheets of mixed media paper, which leads me onto paper. Now it's expected for ACEOs that you use a good quality thick paper, something 300 GSM or more. So for the coloured backgrounds I was using 300 GSM watercolour paper, and for the tangle drawings 300 GSM mixed media paper. I'd read that they should feel like a trading card rather than just a bit of paper. But I'm not really part of this whole trading community, so if anyone knows better, do let me know in the comments below. So what I realised when I was doing these was that I didn't like not having a border around my work. I like having a clean edge around all my drawings, and that's true in my sketchbooks as well. It just, for me, I hate drawing right up to the edge of the page. It just aesthetically doesn't work for me. So these coloured backgrounds were still going right up to the edge of the paper, and it just, it wasn't working for me. So on my blank cards, I tried just having a pencil border, which I could erase later. And I also tried with a marker pen border, as I would in my sketchbook. And I much preferred these methods, and it just felt so much more like my work. So drawing on these little pieces of card is not as easy as it might seem. A standard Sharpie worked okay, but I was getting a lot of join marks, which I can usually control when I'm doing a larger drawing. And I also found that I needed a much finer nib pen than usual. My gel pen wasn't really happy, and I wasn't able to curve off all those corners quite as well as I usually would on a larger drawing. So I ended up using my 0.1 fine liner, which was the best for this kind of drawing. It gave me much more control than my gel pens or my marker pens, but I still had to really concentrate on making those edges as smooth as I could. It's just a lot harder drawing a small, tiny miniature drawing. The other thing that I found was holding the paper down on the desk was a little fiddly too, because usually on an A4 sheet, which is the size that I usually work on, your hand resting on the page is enough to keep the paper still. On such a small piece of card, this wasn't going to happen. So I did start taping the edges down with a little bit of masking tape just to hold the paper still, which helped, but it was still a bit fiddly. So naturally I decided to scale down some of my neurographic art, and these were actually pretty effective. But working in such a small space really does mean that you have to think a little harder about the composition. And on some of the cards I used marker pen for the colour, which was quite easy to do and quite easy to control, but it still took so much more concentration than one of my larger drawings. I also tried using gouache paint, and again it was so fiddly. I was having to use the tiniest of little brushes and having to work really slowly so that I could control the paint and the brush. And in some ways, creating these miniature drawings took so much more effort than creating a larger one. On each card that I was pleased with, it took about 20 to 30 minutes to create, which is, quite insane really. So I also tried doing some little pen and ink drawings on these as well, and again, it was insanely difficult to work in such a small area. And hats off to those artists that really do create some really detailed work on these miniature cards. Creating ACEOs looks really easy, but actually I found it was quite hard to do. I did enjoy the process of it all though, and I can see why people enjoy making them. So I really found my ACEO experiment quite interesting to do. I really did enjoy drawing them, even though they were a little bit more challenging than I first appreciated. I'd seen them online, I'd seen people drawing them, and I thought, I could do that. But actually, it wasn't as simple as that. I did try listing some of my ACEOs on eBay, because like you, I've probably seen an awful lot of posts where people have said, I sold this one for £20, I've sold 7 ACEOs this week. And I was just really interested because I know that it's quite a thing in the United States, but I don't know that it's a real big thing in the UK here. So I listed some of mine up on eBay, and I put them up for 5-day auctions just to see how they'd go, and I priced them up at £1.75 as a starting bid. Might have been a bit optimistic there. At the end of the 5-day auction, I'd sold a big fat 0. And interestingly, I'd only had 1 view on all of them and 2 views on this one. So yeah, I don't know that ACEOs are a really big thing, or whether neurographic or Zentangle ACEOs are really going to be very popular anyway. But I did it as a trial, and I was just really interested to see how it would work. So it was a complete fail really, but actually I quite like doing these, and I might do some more. I've got dozens and dozens of little cards that are cut up that still need drawings on them, so I'm not going to waste those. I will, over time, just pop a few of these in my bag or in my pencil case and just draw on them when I feel like it. So I really hope that you've enjoyed my little venture into creating ACEOs, and if you're thinking of making your own, I hope that you've learnt 1 or 2 little things. Do let me know in the comments below your thoughts on ACEOs and your experiences with creating them. I'd really love to hear from you. And yeah, do give me a thumbs up if you've made it this far. Your support genuinely means an awful lot to me, and I hope to catch up with you again soon.